Welcome to the Jedi Ranger. I'm John Berry 555, and today I'm continuing my 10th anniversary reviews of Star Wars Rebels with Season 2, Episode 13, The Protectors of Concord Dawn. This episode originally aired on DisneyXD on January 27th, 2016, which of course is 10 years ago as of the upload of this video. Now, before I get too far into my review, I do want to address that when I was watching this video, I had certain events that have recently happened inside the United States in Minneapolis on my head, and I was thinking, okay, does this episode have anything to say on that? No, not really. We probably actually have to watch Star Wars Andor for something to say about an authoritarian government, or a wannabe authoritarian government, or government trying to be authoritarian. We're going to look at it several different ways. Andor is a place to look for something like that rather than Rebels. Especially because Rebels is designed for kids. It's not a kid show in the sense of, toddlers, but it's definitely what you would call, I wouldn't call it overly complex. So it does get surprisingly complex in certain segments. But this episode really is more about the Rebels trying to basically find places they can fly through to other systems without getting hunted by the Empire. Well, the Mandalorian plane known as Concord Dawn is not controlled by the Empire, so they decide they're going to go see if the Mandalorian Protectors, or the Protectors of Concord Dawn, are willing to let the rebels fly through the system without harassment. It does not go well. The Fenrir, the leader, and the others and his men, and they attack the rebels, A-Wing starfighters, and Harold gets damaged, and, well, she's alive, but she was definitely injured, and Sabine is not taking it well at all. Especially because it was Sabine who pointed out Concord Dawn to the rebels, to Phoenix, as a potential avenue to transit through. So what ends up happening is Kenan decides that he's going to go take only Chopper. Sabine sneaks on, by the way, and to go and try to continue the diplomatic approach. He does let Sabine, though, plant bombs on the Protectors, starfighters, just in case diplomacy fails. Diplomacy does kind of fail, but honestly, it fails in such a way that actually works out better for the rebels and probably more understandable, more compatible, per se, with Mandalorian culture, perhaps. But anyhow, the thing is, first is that Sabine is angry. And so maybe she wasn't as careful sneaking around as she could have been. I will say that is definitely a possibility. But she is caught. And so what does she do? Well, after she's accused of being a bounty hunter, she says that she's not, or more accurately, she says that she isn't one anymore. Because remember, we learned a couple episodes ago that she did do a stint bounty hunting. And then she reveals that and then because they won't ask her to identify, because she's denying that the fact that she's a bounty hunter, that's her armor from her family. And so she reveals that she's of Clan Wren House Vizsla, and the Protectors immediately call her Death Watch and a traitor, and then she says no, her mother was, but she's not. But that scene there, the Protectors of Concord Dawn calling Death Watch traitors, is important for us, the audience. Now, to those who never watch Clone Wars, that doesn't make sense, but to people who watch Clone Wars, that scene reveals to the audience that the Protectors are not going to be the bad guys. They may be gruff, they may be hostile, may be antagonistic, but they are not going to be villains for the rebels. And that, I think, is why they had made that choice, besides, so that Sabine has, maybe you could say, a troubled past, per se. But ultimately is to show us, the audience, that the Protectors were not big fans of Death Watch, and Death Watch were the bad guys. Rebels are the good guys. Yes, the Protectors and the Rebels are not getting along right now, but that's because they're not getting along, not because the Protectors are bad guys. Again, not everyone would have picked up on that, but to those of us who knew that background, this adds something to the story. Otherwise, it'd be like, okay, Death Watch and Protectors don't get along, and that would be sufficient for most people. But for those of us who know, we get to know a little bit more about what's going on, get that little bit of enrichment. That's callbacks and all that done right. Well, It's neat. If you know, it enhances your experience of the story, but if you don't know, if you don't get it, it doesn't detract, it doesn't take away, it doesn't bring up extra questions. That is how fan service and callbacks and Easter eggs probably should be held. But besides the fact that it did serve a story purpose to giving us the audience additional context, it also serves to explain why diplomacy ended up failing. And Sabine also challenges Fenrir to a one-on-one duel for Fenrir nearly killing Heras, because Sabine's mad. Now, while Sabine's doing all that, Kenan just walks into Fenrir's hut and starts up a pleasant conversation. Thanks him for having saved his life during the Clone Wars, because we learned in this episode that not only did Fenrir train clone trooper pilots during the Clone Wars, but that also he led a squadron during the third battle of Magneto, in which Kenan was a part of, and Kenan credits the actions of Fenrir's squadron in suppressing CIS droid forces and all that for him and his masters and the clones with them's very survival. Kind of like, okay, you saved my life, now I'm going to give you a chance for me to save your life, essentially. Basically, Ken is insinuating that if you side with the rebels, your life is going to be fine, either because Empire or because I got an angry Mandalorian sabotaging your base. Ken didn't say that, but he was thinking that in his head, that if he doesn't get a diplomatic solution, the angry Mandalorian is going to blow something up. Sabine does feel better when she actually does blow the Starfighters up. She needed that release of her anger. But even more than that, to that conversation, Ree was quite respectful, and Kenan presents the argument that just pass through. The Empire is going to betray you guys eventually. Yes, they're paying you right now, giving you a small taste of the resources, but eventually you will come to be an enemy to them, and they will go after you. And of course, Fenrir is, I think in the back of his head he understands it, but he probably also thinks that, well, have the Empire weakened by the rebels, so maybe I'll have a chance when they do come for me. Not yet willing to band together per se. In fact, if we take what we learned from the Mandalorian, eventually, that the Mandalorians are purged by the Empire before they could ally themselves with the rebels. And I think that's very important. The Mandalorians, right now, the Protectors, and then we learn later in the episodes that Gar Saxon and his people have sided with the Empire at the time this episode is set. The Protectors eventually side with the rebels, more or less. I'll get to that in a moment. But the thing is eventually, though, the Mandalorian people, culture, decide they're not really happy with the current arrangement with the Empire and decide to say no. And the Empire goes very heavy-handed on them because the Mandalorians were no longer useful for them. And then, of course, everything we saw, the flashback scenes in the Mandalorian establishes why we didn't see really any Mandalorians out and about during the original trilogy, even though they would have been probably pretty useful for the rebellion. Granted, that's not what the story of the original trilogy was about, but that's a whole different can of worms that we can get into, and why we don't see such things. It's because it wasn't needed for the story. But anyhow, we can justify those small things all we want. But the thing is things do go south in this episode. Kenan and Sabine end up fighting the Protectors. But during all that, Fenrir's fighter was the only one that wasn't damaged. And so what does Kenan do? Jumps on the fighter and takes Fenrir prisoner. And Fenrir has his men stand down and to let the rebels pass through. Basically, he's a hostage. That actually kind of reminds me, at least in CK3, so Crusader Kings 3, and I suspect also in real history, it was not uncommon for hostages to be exchanged in order to keep the peace between two different groups. I mean, maybe, I guess. I guess we could take that as something there, but Kenan understood why Fenrir made that decision, because he knew Fenrir realized that now that he's captured, the Empire is never going to rescue him, and if the Empire does come snooping, he can't let the Empire know, because he tells his men, ever since the rebels, never happened, you don't tell the Empire anything. So keeping it secret from the Empire, showing that they don't fully trust the Empire, which goes back to my earlier point. And also, too, Fenrir knows that no matter what, if the Empire hears about this, it's basically he's done for, so his best bet is to let the rebels grow, to let them move, because that's going to give him and his protectors the best chance of surviving now that the situation for him has changed. Which is insightful, and also maybe something we can take away about how authoritarian regimes operate. Once you're no longer useful to them, they will discard you. And Fenrir in this moment realized he was no longer useful for the Empire, and he chose a decision that would not only save his life, but also give him and his men the best chance of survival. Now, I know what happens later on in the timeline, because I'm watching these 10 years later after my original watch. But we're not going to talk about it because it's not relevant to this episode. But yeah, that's what I got to say about this episode. There's a lot more I can talk about too in regards to this episode. Small things here and there that we learn about Mandalorian, such as there's a scene where Kanan basically frustratingly says that Mandalorians, all they know is they don't know how to something. Basically, he expressed his frustration that they seem to always solve everything at the barrel of a blaster rather than talking. And him being a Jedi. But there's actually something even better. There's a scene slightly earlier in the episode before him and Sabine get to one of the moons of Concord Dawn, where he says that I think Sabine expressed something about Jedi always trying for the peaceful things that everyone agrees with their way of thinking, and Kanan simply responds, "That's why we are at war." And that's actually quite profound when you think about it. The Jedi generally want peace. They want people to live in harmony and cooperation and get along. But not everyone's like that. Many Jedi realize that. Kanan certainly realizes it, and he understands that's why he's at conflict with the Empire, because the Empire is not letting everyone live in peace, not letting everyone live in harmony. So that's some food for thought I want to give you guys. However you want to apply that to the real world, just remember, if a regime is not letting you, live in peace, there's probably a good chance that they're up to no good. But that's all I got to say. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching my video. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to give this video a like and share. Also, consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date on all my latest content. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and as always, have a good day, a good night, wherever you are. May the Force be with you always.